Dear ladies and gentlemen, good morning from Jakarta and welcome to our webinar, Environmental Technology in Indonesia and Malaysia. I thank you very much for your participation. My name is Sigmund Nemeti and I'm the Austrian Commercial Counselor in Jakarta. This webinar is organized in conjunction with Go International, the internationalization initiative of the Federal Ministry of Digital and Economic Affairs and the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber. At the beginning of our event, I would like to introduce Indonesia and the Indonesian market to you. After that, I will hand over to Mr. Andreas Devatmoko. He's the director of PT Sarana Cipta Sabta Pesona, who will give you an insight into environmental technology in Indonesia and business opportunities for Austrian companies. Then Mr. Reinhard Zimmermann, the Austrian Commercial Counselor in Kuala Lumpur, and Mr. Tobias Mangelmann, Senior Advisor at System IQ Limited, will take over and present the topic of waste management in Malaysia. In the last 15 minutes, we will conduct a Q&A session with our experts. If you have any questions, you can type them into our question window at any time. In case we do not have the opportunity to answer your question during the Q&A session, we will come back to you via email after the webinar. I'd like to say a few things about Indonesia now. Indonesia is the largest country in Southeast Asia with a population of 270 million inhabitants, which makes it the fourth most populous country in the world. More than 56% of all Indonesians live in cities. However, more than half of the country's population is concentrated on the island of Java, the most populous island in the world and one of the most densely populated places on Earth. As a consequence, the island faces many challenges, including water and waste treatment, as well as air pollution and congestion. Therefore, much improvement and innovation in these sectors is necessary. The other parts of this archipelago, which is almost 23 times the size of Austria and occupies an area of 1.9 million square kilometers, are significantly less populated. Indonesia's geography brings with it significant challenges in many ways. More than 17,500 islands are part of this vast territory. Effective infrastructure and logistics play a crucial role in accessing them. With its huge domestic market, it is the largest economy in Southeast Asia and also part of the G20. The average economic growth rate over the last years was constantly above 5% per year. Coronavirus hit the Indonesian economy very hard, but according to experts, high growth rates are to be expected for the upcoming years. Despite some challenges, Indonesia offers enormous economic potential due to its size. Indonesia is also a significant member of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, of which the headquarters is situated in Jakarta, in the capital of Indonesia. Furthermore, Indonesia is one of the members of the largest free trade agreement in the world, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP. Now I would like to hand over to our expert, Mr. Andreas Devatmoko, who is Managing Director of the Indonesian environmental consulting firm PT Sarana Cipta Sabta Pesona, which provides, amongst others, renewable energy project development services. He is also Secretary and co-founder of the Forest Wood-Based Biofuel Society, MAPE BHI, in Indonesia. Mr. Devatmoko has been active in this field for many years and will inform you about the current situation and potential of environmental technology in Indonesia. I would now like to ask Mr. Devatmoko, Andreas, to come into the street, please.
Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for kind introductions, Mr. Sigmund Nemeti. First of all, as Mr. Nemeti explains, the vastness of Indonesia also brings along a huge problem in terms of managing its growth. recently, the Indonesian government, President of Indonesia, Mr. President Joko Widodo, signed a new law, passing a new regulations, a presidential decree that totally changed the environment regulations in Indonesia. But before we go into that, I would like to brief the agenda of my presentations today. I'll go through four stage of explanations. The first one is about the regulations itself, changes in regulations. After that, I'm going to explain about the company's extended responsibility on handling their production's waste. Third, I will explain about the clean water and clean air opportunities in Indonesia, situations and opportunities that comes along with it. And then we might have a question and answer after the closings. Okay, as I mentioned before, there's a paradigm shift in Indonesia's waste management recently. This is due to the fact that the Indonesian parliament just passed a new law that creating a lot of controversy at the beginning of the year during the pandemic lockdown, which is the Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja, the job creations law. And then a lot of sectors of Indonesia asking to the government, what will impact the process of a business? What will impact the process of waste management included? Even though the objective is to create jobs as many as possible for the Indonesians, inviting investors, but certain law that needs to be maintained as it is. So the presidential decree number 22 that passed the beginning of this year, 2021, intended to give ways for the investors, for the businesses to see waste in a different way. Some of the content of this 386 pages presidential decrees mentions about something interesting. It covers what previously sees as hazardous materials as an output of the waste, of industrial waste, now becoming a new input as a raw material for another industrial process and applications. This creates new opportunities for technology companies, especially in Austria, who can help extract these raw materials out of this hazardous waste and commercialize it according to this presidential decree. However, there are some issues that needs to be followed. We go to the next presentations, is that some of this industry that's creating this hazardous pollutant are located far away from the central government's control. Let's say they are in the industrial estates somewhere in the eastern part of Indonesian islands. So the central government, in this case the Ministry of Environment, give the rights of control and supervisions to the municipal governments in that locations where the operations of that mining company is located. The problem with that is that the capacity of the local Indonesian government or municipal government there are not ready to do the supervisions. Means there's a lot of opportunity for Austrian companies, especially that involve in educations or capacity buildings, to go and meet with these local governments in Indonesia to help them in capacity building and monitoring, to help them to monitor the activity of the new hazardous materials handling. Apart from that, the regulations or the new presidential decree also give the rights of this previously concentrated activity. Let's say they are licensed to do palm oil business, let's say plantations and refinery of palm oil. But now they want to expand their business to handle the waste of the palm oil industries to make a new type of product, let's say a biofuel, a carbon-based biofuel, or let's say a biodiesel. So they can apply to Indonesian government in their local of expanding their license to include this new business instead of sending their waste to far away waste handling material locations. In Java, there's only 2 locations, one in West Java, the other one is on the East Java, which costs a lot for industries to send their waste to those locations, those 2 locations. Now they can make it, they can handle it in their own sites or industry. But these rules or these regulations also include additional restriction for entities who are in the recycling business. For the first time, the Indonesia's clean air guidelines is issued strongly in this business. Okay, let's say I'm showing you on this second slide that a company like Freeport-McMoRan, which is licensed to do a copper and gold mining, they do the operations like open pit mines and then process it into create ore mines or process to concentrate on the copper. And then they dump their waste in the forms of tailing rocks, small rocks, into a river in East and on the West Papua. Now, after the Freeport-McMoRan become a subsidiary of Indonesia's Mine ID company, the Mine ID company asked the government of Indonesia a new license to mine rare earth materials from the tailing. So this is kind of this change of attitude. Instead of seeing waste as a waste, now seeing waste as raw materials for other industrial process, what I mentioned before. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So, as I mentioned, we don't have to send the waste, hazardous waste, to some other places to process. If we can take the benefit of extracting whatever left in that waste for commercial use, we apply new license, expand the existing license to a new license, along with the unused materials to be sold in international market. That's a new paradigm. But we have to see how it will be implemented in the next few days, next few years. Also inside the Presidential Decree number 22 is mentions about the producer extended responsibility, especially for companies, consumer products that mostly use single-use plastics to cover their consumers' product. Now, government have more tools to enforce that regulations by some kind of duty or tax that will be set by the Ministry of Finance, the magnitude of the sanctions. And besides, the consumers' post-consumption is located in most big cities instead of the villages. The problem of single-use plastics or packaging plastics is everywhere. It's not only on the cities, but on Indonesian's river and Indonesian's oceans. It's already known worldwide, the situations of Indonesia's oceans from monsoon season, a lot of waste, plastic waste on the ocean. not only produced by the Indonesian consumers, but also coming to Indonesia by illegal import from Australia, Canada, after the Chinese government stopped importing the recycled plastics. They are coming through some illegal ways to Indonesian side, in Indonesian villages, assuming that they will do some recycling. As a matter of fact, not all of them can be recycled. Those plastics end up polluting our ocean and our waterways. And one of the solutions that proposed a few years ago is to make it as raw materials for energy. Burn it in the incinerator. That's the most common solutions everywhere. But that solutions also rejected by the citizens of the cities, of big cities. They don't want to see chimneys on their backyard. So what's the problem? What's happening after that? The piling up of the trash in the city's landfill already on the critical situations today. Jakarta is on the brink of collapse of the waste dump because they cannot accept anymore 7,000 metric tons per day waste into their landfill. So they have to find a solution. One of the solutions is to split the waste of Jakarta, for example, into 5 regions in Jakarta: South Jakarta, Southwest Jakarta. Each of these regions must solve their own waste problem. But the problem is they don't have the land to do it. The local governor cannot provide the land to build a waste to energy projects inside Jakarta. So what's the solution again? Is by implementing a circular economic model into each producers of waste. Let's say it's a household, they have to solve their household by themselves as much as possible. Go back to the regulations. Landfill is no longer supported by the central government of Jakarta to be implemented all over Indonesia. Traditional waste to energy project always have a problem in where to locate the energy conversion. New proposals coming, which is efficient waste to energy, including material recycling, still not enough to solve this problem faced in 12 big cities that is already stated since 2019 as the most pressing cities to be solved. From this list, only one of these 12 cities, provincial capital of Indonesia, already have an operational waste to energy projects, which is Surabaya city, while the other cities are either pending, rejected, refused, or still in progress of discussion of how to solve their solid waste problem. So from this 3 years, despite of COVID situations and lockdown, we can see that waste to energy project for capital cities is taking too long to accomplish. Should be another solution for this problem. In terms of air quality of the waste to energy projects in Indonesia compared to Austria or EU in this case, there's a lot of rooms for pollutions, air pollutions, to be happening in Indonesia. If you have solutions in Austria that can help to achieve much better air quality, then I'm sure that Indonesia will be glad to accept that technology. As I mentioned in the agenda today, we also will like to talk about the extended producer responsibility. Big brands like Danone, Nestle, Indofood they have teaming up to create this non-profit organizations or non-profit alliance to create land bank, waste bank everywhere in Indonesia. Some already use the technology developed in Europe to recycle polymer back to same polymer, removing all the impurities like coloring, aluminum, without any burning. So they use a chemical process instead of waste to energy type of solutions. This extended producer responsibility, however, cannot be implemented only to big brand companies, because most of the consumer products in Indonesia is produced by small and medium enterprises, which also use plastics as their packaging. If we implement a high or strong regulations or strong enforcement for the small and medium enterprises, then their business will collapse. So there should be another solutions which is cheaper and more acceptable. This typical Indonesian packaging is very small in terms of size due to the economic of scale for these consumer products to be reached into a villages level or lower income communities, and that is creating more problem in terms of waste. Okay, a typical waste, solid waste in Indonesia in any cities is 40 to 70% is biomass or food waste, 20 to 35% plastics. You can see in this table in this presentations. And during the rainy seasons, all are wet and heavy and difficult to convert into RDF or fuel. Okay, so how do we achieve, knowing that this type of waste, solid waste is in Indonesia, is this kind of Indonesia? What kind of strategy that we have in hand? Okay, we cannot do waste to energy for solid waste in big cities only. We have to extend more, tackle the problem of biomass first, because they are the biggest. 50 to 70% is biomass. So if we can move into, instead of the city or municipal, go down to a district level, we can do this maggot farming, anaerobic digester, aerobic composter, and then whatever's left can turn into RDF, refuse derived fuel, as a pellet for gasification technology. And then use all these materials that have been processed as a feedstock or materials for organic farming and aquacultures, either as electricity or as a gas or as a fertilizer, solid and liquid fertilizers, including protein from the maggot farms. The problem with Indonesian's waste bank that government sponsored is they come up short always in funding. Besides, in many cities that I experience, although the citizens is already doing separations from their home, but the lack of, not infrastructure, but the equipment of the city operator is forcing all this material that is already separated at home to be dumped into a single truck, mixed all over again, and then difficult to separate again, so they send it to landfill. This is an opportunity as well, if you can see it from the other side. So these 12 big cities of Indonesia that already prioritized since 2018 cannot solve by doing business as usual. A lot of other things needs to be done, like the transportation technology or transportation methodology, and circular economic must be in place. Okay, we skip to next subject about the air pollution. Many sectors in Indonesia are also concerned about the air pollution, especially the industry that move away from fossil fuels by changing into biofuels. For the beginning of this year, announcement already made by the government that biodiesel is already produced up to 30%, B30. Next year, perhaps it's a B100 using full CPO, crude palm oil based, instead of fossil based. And also the transportation sector, big brands in Indonesia that operate and produce cars already make announcement that they will sell electric cars. Large battery companies from Korea, China, and Japan already set up office here and set up a factory in Indonesia. Okay, I will try to finish these presentations quickly because the time is limited. You can see and read my presentations when it will be distributed later on by Mr. Sigmund Nemeth. And if you have any questions to me, you can ask through the organizations that conducted this webinar, and I will be glad to answer any questions that I can answer immediately. Thank you very much. I'll hand this platform to Mr. Reinhard Zimmermann, the Austrian Commercial Counselor in Kuala Lumpur. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dewatmoko. It was very interesting to see and to hear what is happening in Indonesia, and it's also good news to hear that waste wins more and more importance also as a valuable source, not only as something to get rid of. So I think that's a very important information for Austrian companies to see that something is moving in Indonesia. Yeah, also a lot of things are moving in Malaysia. My name is Reinhard Zimmermann. I'm the commercial counselor of Advantage Austria here in Kuala Lumpur, in charge for Malaysia and Brunei. And I'm happy that I can share with you some information about the Malaysian waste management sector. Let's go into detail. As Malaysia is a federal state like Austria, so no wonder that due to the different jurisdictions in various states, we have a complex legal landscape also for the waste management. There is one relevant national law with the name Solid Waste and Public Cleansing Management Act. It's from the year 2007 with the name Act 672, but it was only adapted up to now by 6 states and 2 federal territories. For this big part of Malaysia, one federal government entity, the SW Corp, is in charge to handle the solid waste. And they granted up to now already licenses to 3 concessionaires in order to take care of the solid waste. For this part of Malaysia, funding is coming from local and federal government sources in order to finance these services. So, and then as a matter of fact, there are also other states which do not follow this national law, the so-called non-672 states, where local authorities like on a municipal district, city council or sub-district level are in charge to make the solid waste management. So there are quite important states among them, like Selangor, Penang, Perak, East Malaysia on Borneo, just to name some. Now I'd like to go a little bit more into detail which governmental organizations and institutions are in charge for implementing as well as for formulation of the policies. So as I mentioned before, there are 2 parts, the federal government and the state government. So on the federal government for the Act 672 countries, states, you have different ministries involved. the Ministry of Economic Affairs, for instance, to develop the 12 Malaysia plan. The Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs to take care of price controls and control goods. The Ministry of Environment and Water, which gets more and more importance, they have to develop the roadmap for zero single-use plastics, and also are in charge to formulate the National Plastic Pact. Then we have the Ministry of Housing and Local Government to set up the national strategy for solid waste management and to take care of the Act 672. And belonging to the Ministry of Housing and Local Government is the Department of National Solid Waste Management, in order to develop the policies and to grant the licenses for the concessionaires in order to collect and dispose the waste. And so these institutions are in charge for the policy formulation. The institutions in gray, and the institution in green, as mentioned before, the SW Corp, is in charge for solid waste management, but also in order to increase the awareness among the public in order to improve recycling. So, and the non-672 states have to take care of all of this waste management on a state level or a local level. So this is already quite complicated. So this was my short, hopefully, introduction, and I would like to hand over now to our expert, who is much more expert than me in waste management sector. It is Mr. Tobias Mangelmann. He is senior advisor for System IQ and also an independent consultant here in Malaysia. Tobias, he spent already more than 15 years in Malaysia and Southeast Asia. He worked for global consulting firms in several entrepreneurial roles. So after moving to Malaysia, he was for more than 8 years with McKinsey, where he co-founded the Southeast Asia Sustainability Practice. Afterwards, he took care of the consulting activities of the Finnish company Pyöri Management Consulting. And now Tobias has a dual role. On the one hand, he is the senior advisor for System IQ, an international consulting firm which he represents and supports in Malaysia. And on the other side, he leads his own local Malaysian consulting firm. He focuses on a few sustainability-related topics close to his heart. One is sustainable land use and forestry. The other is circular economy and recycling. And last but not least, renewable energy. So without until further ado, I would like to hand over to Mr. Tobias Mangelmann, and thank you very much that you joined us.
Thanks a lot, Reinhard, for the introduction. And unfortunately, I have a big thunderstorm in my background right now, but I hope that it doesn't disturb the presentation. And before I start, as a quick agenda, if you want, the 3 topics that I want to talk about. As mentioned by Reinhard, I'm talking more about plastic recycling and waste management, where there are a lot of evolving opportunities right now. And as usual, I mean, the plastic recycling value chain has many stakeholders, starting with the packaging companies, the consumers, etc. But I will focus my presentation very much on the 3 steps of the waste collection, the sorting and aggregation, and the recycling, because similar to what Mr. David Moko mentioned for Indonesia, there are evolving opportunities because of new policies like extended producer responsibilities. But firstly, let me spend a bit of time explaining these 3 parts of the value chain: the waste collection, the sorting, aggregation, the recycling in more detail. Because unfortunately, all of them are not straightforward, because as Reinhard mentioned, the waste management sector in Malaysia is a little bit complicated. Malaysia, as Austria, is a country with a federal government and Bundesländer or states. And originally, the the focus of the last 20 years was to increase the collection coverage, right? To make sure that the entire population has waste management collection. We are around 33 million people, much smaller than Indonesia. 80% of them live in West Malaysia, and here I only show the map of West Malaysia. But that's where we have the higher population density, and where we also have, unfortunately, most of the waste, with around 1.17 kilogram per person per day, which translates into solid 14 million tons of waste per year. And the current waste disposal is largely landfills. Sometimes it's good sanitary landfills with methane capturing, but we also still have legal but unsanitary dump sites. And as when I mentioned, the federal government already tried to make sure we improve the collection as much as possible with this Act 672, and basically grouped some of the states together and gave the waste management responsibility to federally appointed concessionaires, which are colored yellow, green, blue here, which are fairly sizable companies, which had the task to increase the collection of the waste in their states. Some states, for political reasons, didn't join, but especially the state of Selangor around Kuala Lumpur, around the capital, is also a very large state with a high population. And in these states, you then had these waste management concessionaires develop and grow into fairly large companies. Since they were appointed as concessionaires for a large area with long-term contracts, they have the ability to invest into collection infrastructure, into large trucks, into compactor trucks, etc. And as you can see, they have a fairly sizable revenue, somewhere between 80 to 200 million euros, depending on the company. Each of them cover a fairly large amount of inhabitants, between 2 to 7 million people. And they are, I mean, fairly large companies that are professional to deal with. But of course, the focus has been on collection, right? And there are still 20%, not 20, but less than 20% of the population that do not have door-to-door collection, especially in the rural areas, where the collection is done along the road, where there are communal bins. I will not focus here so much on this, because I think while it is a challenge, it's not necessarily an opportunity, I think, for many Austrian companies. But these 60% of the Malaysian population that have very good collection services, I think that's where a lot of the opportunities are. And if I jump to the other end of the value chain, there we have the recycling industry. And actually, Malaysia has a fairly good and fairly well-developed recycling industry. And if you want more details, the World Bank, literally 2 weeks ago, published a very good report. You see the source at the bottom, that has done a very good job trying to map the material flows of the most prominent plastic types. And for those who are not into plastic so much, you see the abbreviations there, the PET for bottles, HDPE, LDPE for films, etc. And across Malaysia, you always have companies who are able to mechanically recycle these materials. Often it's, of course, downcycling. It's not necessarily immediately recycled into similar end users. There's only one plant that does now bottle-to-bottle recycling. And there's also a very, very strong focus on the easy-to-recycle materials. So the rigid materials, the monomaterials. And as Mr. Devat Moko mentioned already, same like in Indonesia, that is not all there is, right? There are a lot of more difficult to recycle materials. In addition, worth mentioning that also Malaysia has significant legal imports of plastic waste, which are a significant contributor to the plastic waste processing. And similar to Indonesia, when China closed the borders for plastic waste imports, the import volumes, the legal import volumes in Malaysia jumped. Unfortunately, also illegal import volumes jumped, or wrongly declared volumes, which led to a lot of problems with illegal plastic imports, illegal processing. In 2019, the Malaysian government actually started to pursue these companies, the illegal importers. The volumes in 2019 dropped. This number is probably not the final number yet. That was a year-to-date number as of October 2019. But by now, also the imports would have improved again, increased again, since there are better controls in place for what kind of material types are imported. So on the one hand, we have this good collection infrastructure. On the other hand, we have the quite good recycling industry. But somewhere this middle part, the aggregation and separation part, that is still a very tricky, only partly solved topic. Because while the official recycling rate that the government published increases constantly, it seems that this recycling volumes are mainly coming from commercial customers and industrial customers, from malls, from small enterprises, small and medium-sized enterprises, etc. And the government had a concerted effort in 2015, trying to push also for recycling and separation at source by households. But ultimately, as you see on the very right side, the success was limited. The recycling volumes that were collected by the former waste management concessionaires were very small. And that brings me to this third topic, the bucket in between, this question of the aggregation, sorting, and separation. Because while we have on the one hand households that have a collection service, and on the other hand we have the recyclers, in the middle we have collection infrastructure, separation and the aggregation infrastructure that is very much focused on SMEs and on the informal sector. So this chart looks a bit complicated, but just to point out a few important topics. For example, many people in the greater Kuala Lumpur area still live in apartments. So in apartments, the waste management is not directly collected by the waste management company. Of course, there is an internal apartment infrastructure where waste is collected. And cleaners are actually often able to recycle part of that material. So they are able to sort out aluminum cans, cardboard boxes, or also plastic. The same is true for the formal collection. Sometimes if the truck crews are allowed to sort it, they will actually try to sort it, extract some of the recycled materials and sell them for their own benefit, right, to earn a small side income. And since the picture often says more than 1,000 words, these are examples, right, of this informal or partly formal sector collection, right, where even a large compactor truck will literally put the cardboard underneath the truck, all the metals and valuable plastic will be put in plastic bags, and the plastic bags are being put on top of the truck. Or as you see at the bottom left, those tricycles are tricycles driving around in my neighborhood who are collecting recyclable materials that they find outside the houses. Unfortunately, we also still have material waste pickers on landfills. We have cleaners in apartments. The right pictures, the top right, you will see are both some cleaners from apartments who basically sort out whatever they can sort and then sell it to junkyards. And what is missing here is we do not have an ARA yet, an Altstoffrecycling of Austria or a duales System Deutschland, or whatever you call this middle piece in the different countries, this EPR scheme or the extended producer responsibility. And to put a value to what we are missing out on, referring back to the World Bank study again, they tried to quantify and said that roughly $1 billion in resin, or roughly 1 million tons of resin, are lost every year because they are not collected for recycling. They are collected, but they end up in a landfill. They are not collected for recycling. And we have, of course, mentioned some of the barriers already. There is a formalized collection for mixed waste, but it hasn't been very successful for recyclable waste. The informal sector, of course, focuses on what is most valuable, right? They focus on aluminum cans, on large cardboard boxes, and then maybe on a PET bottle and a big shampoo bottle and so on, right? But the plastic is a secondary material they're focusing on. Historically, of course, packaging producers were not so worried about the recyclability, right? They might have, they could have improved, or they are improving the packaging to make sure it is recyclable. And as a result, we have this $1 billion of resin, or this 1 million ton of resin that is probably lost to landfills, burning, and nature every year. And of course, the World Bank also put a very nice list of initiatives that give you ideas how the government or how the private sector could try to capture some of these materials. You will see the green shaded buckets here are more for the private sector, the blue for the government. And I think all these interventions are very well received by the government and by the private sector. And I will not cover all of them now. I will want to focus on 4 that I think are most relevant for the immediate future and also for companies from Austria and Europe. And the first one that I would like to highlight is that if we follow again our flow right from the plastic recycling value chain, the first opportunity, number A, will be because of the implementation of an EPR scheme. It will firstly improve the collection of recyclable at source. It will create additional funding for a waste management system that is underfunded, and it will drive transparency because if companies like Unilever, Coke, and Nestle provide money for it, they also want to see results. They want to see that more materials are recovered. And I'll show afterwards 2 reasons why I'm quite confident that this will happen. As a result of it, when the materials are mobilized, you want to sort them, and you need to sort them properly, right? At the moment, a lot of this sorting happens very manually, literally on the floor. People are picking up pieces as they are on the floor, as they are being deposited by a truck. And that works for bottles and cans, but once you have significant volumes and also difficult materials like flexibles, bags, the famous sachets that Mr. Devatmoko talked about, then you need a better recycling infrastructure. You need material recovery facilities that can be still fairly manual, just with a belt, but they could be also more automated, right? There can be better automated sorting if you have bigger volumes of glass, of paper grades, of plastic grades, and of metals. So A will trigger B, B will trigger D, because once you have all these increased collection volumes, you also have increased volumes of low value plastic, the famous flexibles, multi-layer materials, etc. But once you have already collected them and sorted them, it would be a shame to send them back to a landfill, right? In fact, there for sure will be then better options to chemically recycle these materials, maybe to use them as refuse-derived fuel. Currently, we only have one RDF plant in Malaysia. But once these materials are properly sorted, there will be opportunities to actually create a higher value out of these materials. And topic C, I mean, once we have better quality materials, right, the government will definitely also push for a higher recycled content in the packaging material. At the moment, of course, one of the questions always, how can I include more recycled material if the quality isn't there? Why should I use imported recycled material, etc., etc.? But once the quality of the recycled material increases, there's no reason why not also to improve the content, the share of content in the primary packaging. And as I mentioned, we have a first bottle-to-bottle plant that manages to make PET bottles out of partly recycled material. But there are many other opportunities where instead of downcycling, you can actually try to reuse the material in a similar packaging form. And I won't talk about the BCD now in detail. Only 2 more slides, since I think we're running out of time, to give you the confidence or the reasons why I have the confidence that this chain of events will be triggered now. Because while the government has committed or has written an EPR scheme as a new policy instrument in the 5-year plans, one of the ministries that Reinhard mentioned at the beginning, they have explicitly made it a policy choice now for the next 5-year plan. But in parallel to the government, the private sector is moving as well. And literally, I think 2 days ago, 10 major brands, international and local consumer goods brand, announced to set up a PRO, producer responsibility organization, which has very ambitious targets to increase the recovery for recycling of key plastic or packaging grades, also including UBC, used beverage carton. So given the push and the support from the private sector, this will surely move forward. And while these 10 companies have come together to do it jointly in the Malaysian Recycling Alliance, each of these companies also have their own initiatives already to prove that we can actually build better collection systems. And I only show now one example of Nestle in Malaysia, because it's close to my neighborhood as well, where Nestle has said, okay, we will try to introduce a separate collection cycle. It's not a big-sized yellow bin yet, as what you might know from ARA in Austria. It's a small yellow bin at the moment, but there is a separate collection. And since the awareness of households has increased significantly about the need to do recycling, once you give them the tools, you give them the different collection cycle, you give them the bin and the explanation and the truck, they actually participate. So I think those are the 3 reasons why I'm very confident that this journey will go this way. Firstly, because the government is committed to implement an EPR scheme. The private sector is committed to start on a voluntary basis and ideally, of course, make it mandatory over time. And consumers are actually much more educated than they were 5 or 10 years ago and much more willing to participate in this. I noticed that I ran a bit out of time, but I hope I managed to cover all of it. and I will pass back to Reinhard for managing the question and answers.
Thank you very much, Tobias, for your nevertheless short introduction into this very complex topic of waste management in Malaysia. I'm very happy that I can take over now the Q&A session. First of all, I would like to ask our public to publish your questions if you have not yet done. And I'm starting now with different questions. The first goes to Mr. Andreas Devatmoko, which is related to the following. You talked about the opportunities for Austrian companies in Indonesia, but how do you initiate a privately financed project in the mentioned sectors in Indonesia? And there is also a question, do you have any access to this Mind IT organization in Indonesia in order to open the doors for Austrian companies?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Zimmerman. I'll try to answer the first question first. How to initiate a privately funded project in Indonesia? First, for Austrian company is to ensure there's a consumers of the processed product, not only in Indonesia, but mostly in Austria. Let's say Austrian demands a lot of biomass for heating. We can start with biomass, processed biomass as a pallet for consumers in Austria. But for other materials like plastics or even as hard as rare earth, if you're interested, make sure there's a buyer first, and then secure the raw materials source. With these two in hand or secured in hand, then the financing, no need for Indonesian government support or guarantee to start. That way, we can immediately start the project just by doing securing the two sides, buyer and raw material source. Government, with this new law of job creations law that precedes this waste management law, presidential decree, will give a red carpet for this type of initiative, private initiative. The second question is about my access to Mind ID companies. Mind ID companies is a new established state-owned holding company, mainly in mining and energy. Established just this year, 2001, comprising of Bukit Asam, which is controlling the largest reserve of coal, and the bauxite, Freeport McMoran, copper and gold, and Aneka Tambang, gold and copper, gold and silver mining. And if you ask if I have an access to them, depends on what is the purpose of this access to be used. Is it for bringing the Austrian technology company on extraction technology for Mind ID? Yes, I can help. But if asking for a project tender, oh, I'm sorry, I cannot help. You have to go through the Indonesian procurement platform to do that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Devatmoko. I think we will follow up with this question with our colleagues then in Jakarta to help this Austrian company in more detail. I have here also another new question. Is there a need for R&D support to Indonesian and Malaysian companies for upcycling, refining of biomass or plastic wastes? And might this be subject of funding? Maybe to start with Tobias Mangelmann first. Should I read the question again, or is it clear?
I think I heard it. Whether there's a need, right, for R&D support, and the answer would be for some companies yes, for some no, right? Because as I mentioned, some of the waste management companies are fairly large, right? And also some of the recyclers that have developed, I didn't name them now explicitly, but they are fairly large, right? They have grown into the level of, in euro terms, 40, 50 million euro revenue companies. But there is a lot of smaller companies, right, that have done mechanical recycling, that have done for a long time. And those companies, they would actually benefit from the R&D research, right? Because it's often small products. I mean, this is my milk cap from my milk bottle that I always buy. You might see a small color difference. It's because they have finally included some recycled content. But this is a small company. It's an SME that did it by themselves, right? But not all of them can do it. So yes, when it comes to especially improving the plastic recycling value chain for local SMEs, there will be the demand, or there will be the need for support. For biomass, I don't have an answer.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Reinhardt. In answering your questions, especially for the biomass in Indonesia, currently I'm working with one of the university in Austria to do the gasifications technology transfer technology to Indonesian, but I'm still working on partnering them with a state-owned enterprise who will manufacture those gasification technology. In terms of plastic recycling, yes, Indonesian companies or research group that I know are looking for engineering firm to do the front-end engineering or detail engineering design stage of chemical process for medical plastics waste in demand right now in Jakarta. Due to this COVID-19 pandemic, the number of medical waste is exploding like crazy, including masks, needles, you name it, all these plastics, including PVC bottles, PE, HDPE, and combinations of those. We would like to do the chemical processing instead of mechanical processing, but we don't have the Indonesian teams don't have the engineering for the factory design, like the one that is already done by one French company for big drinking, ready-to-drink product. They use combinations of mechanical and chemical process, but it's designed by Fraunhofer Institute of Germany. So if you have partners in Austria who are keen on this, talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now quite a lot of interesting questions are coming in. Let's go them through. Another question to Mr. Devat Moko. I put it also in the chat function for the speakers that they can read it. In order to offer flue gas cleaning solutions for waste to energy power plants, will there be a need to officially pre-qualify our technology with some Indonesian authorities? I would say keep the answers as short as possible because we have still other questions.
Yes, we need to pass the regulations on the output, but depends on what's being burned. If you burn a lot of plastic contained RDF, then might be the guarantee of your Austrian companies get off the chart, cannot comply with the Indonesian regulations on the Clean Air Act. So you still need to do the pre-installation approval, and after installations, the operations is running. Again, another we call it uji-like operasi, so operational license for those type of filters, flue gas filters.
Okay. Great, thank you. I have another question to both speakers, maybe starting with Tobias Mangelmann. I read it. Is there a demand for technical consultants? That means consulting engineers for project development, policy, social acceptance, permitting, EAI support, planning, tendering, erection supervision, and startup support for communal or industrial waste to energy plants?
Yeah. So the answer would be yes for communal industry or communal waste to energy plants, and not necessarily only waste to energy. It could even be, in the worst case, incineration on islands where you can't transport the materials at a reasonable cost to the mainland anymore, and where you don't have an offtake for the heat or the electricity. Right? But it's a few cases in Malaysia, because we are not such an island-rich state, right, where you don't have so many remote locations. But Malaysia had a bad experience with some island-based incineration disposal options. So as a result, I think there would be the openness to make sure that a next plant is properly planned and managed and set up. But it wouldn't be a lot of opportunities, because we don't have so many of these kind of locations where it would be relevant. Indonesia, on the other hand, has a lot of such islands or allocations, but I don't know how likely the opportunity there is.
Okay. Now, my answer is for that question is yes, we do need, Indonesia needs a lot of consultants, but not on the regulations or permitting. We need consultants of detailed engineering design phase of waste to energy projects. There are some companies who's already here or been here several years back that met with us, and they looking for a large-scale project only. The future in Indonesia, as I mentioned in my short presentations, is Indonesians are not too keen on large-scale waste to energy project, because it congested our street with those trucks. The pollutions, air pollution standard, we know it's too low compared to Europe. So if we let it go, it will ruin the cities in Indonesia. So we bet, I mean, Indonesians' preference right now, the trend of preference is recycling as much as possible. Only those who cannot be recycled then turn into RDF, then into gasifications instead of direct burning, and then produce synthetic fuels based on that. Thank you.
Thank you. I have another question for both. Maybe you can just answer yes or no. It's related to feed-in tariffs for biogas. Is there in Indonesia and Malaysia a green electricity feed-in tariff coming from anaerobic digestion? That means biogas. So Tobias Mangelmann, Malaysia, yes or no? Do you know it?
Yes, but the quota is very limited. So there is a feed-in tariff for biogas, but the quota, I think, at the moment is very small, because Malaysia has a very comfortable reserve margin already. But if you give us the content, I can look it up and send the exact details how small the quota is at the moment.
We have also a sector report about that, which we can share, renewable energy sources in Malaysia. So if there's an interest, we will share this also with this Austrian company. And you, Mr. Devat Moko, how is it with the feed-in tariff in Indonesia for biogas?
For biogas, there is a feed-in tariff, but the similar situations in Malaysia. The quota is very low, especially for Java Island, because Java is already over electricity-wise, it's over capacity, installed capacity. But for other region or outside Java Island, like Sumatra or Kalimantan, whereas the palm oil effluent or POME is abundant, but the electricity demand is very low in that region, in that two islands. In smaller island, which they have cattle dung or manure to be converted to biogas, it's much better to do a smaller scale biogas project and turn it into less than 250 kilowatt power system for rural use, instead of thinking about selling the electricity to the grid. Do it in off-grid is much better, much faster. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much. I have now a question to my colleague Sigmund Nemeti in Jakarta. And the question is the following: in which part of Indonesia do you see the largest demand for environmental technology solutions from Austria. So I hand over to Mr. Sigmund Nemeti.
Thank you, Reinhard. As you have perceived in my introduction, the population in Indonesia is not everywhere equally spread. The vast majority of the population of Indonesia lives on the island of Java, almost 150 million inhabitants. And of course, this population pressure also creates a lot of opportunities in the field of environmental technology. So the very clear answer is the island of Java needs a lot of new technologies. Also, to a certain extent, Bali, because of the tourism there. The other islands are much less populated, so the opportunities will also come, but are not as pressing as on the island of Java itself. With that, I would like to wrap up the Q&A session, and I would like to thank very much our speakers, Mr. Tobias Mangelmann, Mr. Andreas Devatmoko, who's sitting beside me, and my colleague Reinhard Zimmermann from our office in Kuala Lumpur. Thank you so much for participating and giving us this valuable information. And with that, I would like to give you a few last informations. One is that both our office in Jakarta and the office in Kuala Lumpur are planning an event. We are planning in Jakarta a catalog exhibit at the Indo-Water 2021 exhibition, which is scheduled for July 21st to 23rd, 2021, here in Jakarta. It will be a catalog exhibit. Austrian companies will have the possibility to participate through our stand. We would be then distributing the catalogs and information which you send us, and getting back to you on interested participants from the exhibit. In Kuala Lumpur, there is an Austrian showcase, Plastics Recycling and Circular Economy, which is planned for the second half of 2021, possibly first half of 2022. All information about this event can be obtained from our colleagues in Kuala Lumpur. Furthermore, I would like to draw your attention to a new type of report. It's called the Global Situation Report, which our organization, the Austrian Federal Economic Chamber, has initiated. In this Global Situation Report, which you can find under the website at the bottom, new interesting export markets are being presented. The current Global Situation Report, which you can read into, also presents, amongst others, the markets of Malaysia and Vietnam from this region. So I think it would be a very interesting report to take a look at, and please do access the website to see what interesting information you can draw out of it. With that, I would like to conclude our webinar, Environmental Technology, which has been held by our office in Jakarta and our colleagues in Kuala Lumpur. If you have any further questions concerning environmental technology, concerning the contents of the presentations, please don't hesitate to contact us, me in Jakarta and Reinhard Zimmermann in Kuala Lumpur, respectively, about Indonesia and Malaysia. And we are very happy to assist you in pursuing your business objectives in Indonesia and Malaysia. With that, I would like to say thank you very much to Europe. Have a nice day, and we are hoping to hear from you very soon. Thank you very much.